Helena Vance never believed in fate until the night a duke crossed a crowded ballroom and chose her, the woman wearing a paper mask. And when he finally saw her face, his eyes did not fill with shock, but with the shadow of a love he was supposed to have buried years ago. The evening began with rain. Helena stood at the narrow window of her small chamber in Vance House, watching droplets slide down the glass like tears. The sky seemed to mourn with her. A single candle flickered on her dressing table, its weak light revealing faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. The room had once been lovely, once full of warmth and pride, but years of loss had stripped it bare. She wore her mother's old gown, altered again to fit changing fashions. The blue silk had softened with age, its color no longer bright, but gentle and tired, much like the family name it carried. Helena traced the embroidery at the bodice, remembering stories her mother once told of dancing beneath crystal chandeliers, of laughter and promise. Those days felt unreal now, like memories borrowed from another life. Agnes, the family's only remaining maid, finished arranging Helena's dark curls. Her hands were careful, loving, using the few hairpins they still owned. Agnes had stayed when others left, refusing to abandon the family even when wages could no longer be promised. Helena had once tried to release her from service, but Agnes had wept and refused, saying family was worth more than coin. Helena was not attending the grand masquerade as a hopeful young lady. She was attending as the last remnant of a fallen house. Her father, the Earl of Whitmore, had died 3 winters earlier, leaving behind debts that devoured everything. The estate was gone. The paintings were sold. The horses disappeared. Her mother retreated into silence. It became Helena's duty to protect what little dignity remained. So when the invitation arrived, sealed with the crest of the Duke of Ravensford, she could not refuse. Declining would confirm every whisper already trailing our name. The masquerade was tradition. Each season, the Duke opened Ashworth Manor and selected a bride from 8 chosen ladies. Helena's inclusion was not an honor. It was a courtesy to what her family once had been. The other 7 ladies would arrive in gold-trimmed carriages, wearing masks of silk and jewels. Helena would arrive in the family's last carriage, its wheels groaning with age, wearing a mask she had made herself from paper and paste. She told herself it did not matter. She would dance, smile, and leave before midnight. The Duke would never notice her. The journey to Ashworth Manor took 2 hours through rain-soaked roads. Helena sat alone in the carriage, the paper mask resting in her lap. Anxiety tightened her chest, stirring memories she had tried to bury. Once she had loved without fear. 4 years earlier, she had met Edward Blackwood at a summer gathering. He was not strikingly handsome, but his gray eyes held intelligence and quiet depth. He spoke to her as if her thoughts mattered. Their conversations stretched for hours. Soon came letters, books marked with his notes, shared dreams spoken softly between rose bushes. They spoke of a future together, a quiet life, a home filled with books and laughter. Then one day, without warning, the letters stopped. Helena wrote again and again. Silence answered her each time. Then Edward's brother came, cold and polite, delivering words that shattered her heart. Edward had reconsidered. Their match was unsuitable. He wished her well. She never believed it. She wrote more letters. She traveled to London. Edward was gone. His family claimed he had left England. Time passed. Her father died. Poverty closed in. Helena learned how to survive, how to endure without hope. Now the carriage rolled toward Ashworth Manor, and memories rose like ghosts she could not silence. Ashworth appeared through the rain, vast and glowing with candlelight. Carriages lined the drive. Footmen hurried through the storm. Helena stepped down from her shabby carriage with her chin raised, her paper mask tied in place. She would not show shame. Inside, the manor dazzled. Marble floors, painted ceilings, masks of every design. Helena slipped toward the edge of the ballroom, hiding near a tall palm. The 7 chosen ladies stood together, radiant and confident, their eyes trained on the dais. Music shifted. The crowd hushed. Curtains parted. The Duke of Ravensford stepped into the light. Time slowed. Helena's breath left her body. She knew him instantly. The broad shoulders, the way he held himself, the gray eyes scanning the room. Edward Blackwood stood before her. He was not a second son. He was the Duke. Her champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. Whispers followed. Helena backed away, heart pounding, and fled through a side door. She moved blindly through corridors lined with portraits until she reached a small music room. There she pressed her back to the door, shaking. Edward Blackwood was the Duke of Ravensford. Her thoughts raced. Lies. Silence. His brother. Nothing made sense. The door opened. He entered. They stood facing each other across the piano. He did not recognize her. His voice was polite, distant. He apologized for intruding. She could not speak. He stepped closer, concern in his eyes. He noticed her ribbon, realized she was one of the 8. He spoke of courage, of curiosity. He asked her to dance, against reason, against pain. She placed her hand in his. The ballroom watched as the Duke led the woman in the paper mask onto the floor. They danced. The music was slow, heavy with longing. His hand at her waist felt painfully familiar. His voice spoke of ghosts. Her heart ached. When the dance ended, another woman claimed him. Helena withdrew, breaking away before her strength failed. She escaped to the terrace, breathing the cool night air, gripping the stone railing as memories crushed her. Behind her, a voice spoke. Edward stood there again. This time, he had removed his mask. He spoke of her voice, a familiarity, of something he could not place. He asked her true name. She whispered it. He reached for her mask. She gave permission, and as the paper fell away in the moonlight, fate held its breath. For a long moment, Edward simply stared at her. Moonlight touched Helena's uncovered face, pale and shaken, her eyes still wet with unshed tears. The paper mask lay forgotten at their feet, crushed against the stone like something fragile that had finally served its purpose. Edward's hand trembled where it still held the ribbon, his gray eyes moving slowly over her features, as if his mind refused to accept what his heart already knew. Helena, he whispered. The sound of her name on his lips struck her like a blow. It was familiar and unbearable all at once. She had imagined that voice 1,000 times over 4 long years, sometimes gentle, sometimes cruel, always silent in the end. Now it was real, standing before her in flesh and breath. "It cannot be," he said hoarsely. "I was told you had gone, that you had chosen to forget me." She laughed then, a broken sound edged with pain. "Forgotten you?" she said. "Edward, I spent 4 years believing you abandoned me without mercy." His face drained of color. Slowly, as though afraid she might vanish, he lifted his hands and framed her face. His touch was careful, reverent, like a man afraid to wake from a dream. "I wrote to you," he said, again and again. "I explained everything. When you never replied, I believed you had turned away from me." Helena's breath caught. "Your brother came to Van's house," she said quietly. "He told me you had changed your mind, that you found our match unsuitable." Edward stepped back as if struck. Fury darkened his expression, sharp and sudden. "Vincent," he said, the name heavy with bitterness. "He intercepted our letters." The truth unfolded between them, slowly, painfully. Edward spoke of his uncle's illness, of being summoned to Ashworth, of the title he had been forbidden to reveal. Helena spoke of unanswered letters, of shame and silence, of grief piled upon grief. Each word uncovered another wound, another stolen moment. 4 years, Helena said softly. "We lost 4 years." Edward closed his eyes. When he opened them, they shone with something fierce and raw. "I will never forgive him," he said. "But more than that, I will never let you go again." He drew her into his arms, holding her as if she were something precious that had nearly been lost forever. Helena rested her cheek against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. For the first time in years, the ache inside her eased. Inside the ballroom, midnight approached. Edward pulled back and looked at her with quiet determination. "Come with me," he said. "Stand beside me. Let the truth be known." Fear flickered through her. "Edward, I am not dressed for this world any more," she said. They will tear me apart. They will learn, he replied, that courage wears many forms. He offered his arm. She took it. The ballroom fell silent as they entered together. Whispers rippled like wind through silk. The 7 chosen ladies turned as one, disbelief written across painted faces. Lady Catherine stepped forward, her voice sharp and scornful. "This is absurd," she said. "You cannot intend to disgrace this tradition." Edward did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "That woman," he said calmly, "is Lady Helena Vance, and she is the woman I choose." The gasp was immediate and loud. Lady Catherine's lips thinned. "She wore a paper mask," she hissed. "And she wore it with courage," Edward replied. "Something no jewel can buy." The clock began to strike midnight. Edward faced the crowd. "Tonight, tradition demanded I select a bride," he said. "But fate has returned to me the woman I loved, long before titles and masks mattered." He turned to Helena and lowered himself to one knee. "Helena Vance," he said, "will you marry me?" Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. Applause erupted. Some clapped in delight, others in shock. Edward rose and kissed her hand as if sealing a promise that could never be broken. The days that followed moved swiftly. Helena and her mother were brought to Ashworth Manor. Her mother wept with joy when she learned the truth, her quiet grief finally lifting. The scandal sheets raged, but Edward did not care. Vincent's deception came to light soon after. Letters were recovered, lies exposed. He was quietly cast out of polite society, his reputation ruined beyond repair. Helena watched justice unfold with mixed feelings. She felt no triumph, only relief. Preparations for the wedding filled the manor with life. Seamstresses arrived. Florists worked through the halls. Edward insisted on a ceremony worthy of her courage. "You live too long unseen," he told her. "I will not hide you now." The wedding took place in spring beneath colored glass and white roses. Helena walked down the aisle wearing ivory silk, her mother smiling through tears. Edward waited for her with wonder in his eyes. Their vows were simple. Their love was not. As husband and wife, they emerged into sunlight and celebration. Helena no longer felt like the girl in the paper mask. She felt whole. And yet, life still had lessons ahead. Love had been restored, but the future would demand strength, forgiveness, and courage once more. Their story was not finished yet. The morning light spilled gently through the tall windows of Ashworth Manor, touching the ivory walls and polished floors with quiet warmth. Helena stood by the window of her new chambers, her hands resting against the glass, hardly able to believe that this life now belonged to her. The manor no longer felt like a place of judgment and whispers. It felt like home. Edward moved quickly in everything he did. Within days of the masquerade, he made it clear that Helena would never again live in uncertainty. Her mother was brought to Ashworth with care and dignity, her few remaining belongings transferred without creditors ever knowing where they had gone. When Helena told her mother the full truth of lost letters and cruel deception, the older woman wept openly and held her daughter as if afraid she might disappear. The gossip, as expected, was merciless. Society could not decide whether Helena was a clever schemer or a foolish romantic who had stumbled into fortune by accident. Some whispered that Edward had been bewitched. Others insisted the engagement would quietly dissolve once the excitement faded. Helena read the gossip sheets only once. After that, she stopped caring. Edward never wavered. The investigation into Vincent's actions revealed everything. Letters hidden away, lies carefully planned, servants bribed. The truth spread quietly among those who mattered most, and Vincent found doors closing everywhere he turned. He kept his title, but he lost his place. No invitations came, no allies remained. He faded from society like a shadow at dawn. Helena felt no joy in his downfall. She felt only peace. The wedding took place in late spring. Ashworth Chapel filled with light and flowers, and the scent of roses lingered in the air. Helena wore a gown of ivory silk that shimmered softly as she walked. Her mother stood proudly beside her. Edward waited at the altar, his eyes never leaving her face. When he spoke his vows, his voice was steady but thick with emotion. When Helena spoke hers, her heart felt full in a way she had never known before. They were married beneath stained glass and ancient stone, surrounded by witnesses who had once doubted and now stood silent. The days after the wedding passed in gentle happiness. Edward showed Helena every corner of Ashworth, every hidden garden path, every room filled with books and history. They spoke often of the years they had lost, not with bitterness, but with quiet gratitude that they had found their way back to each other at all. Helena learned the duties of a duchess quickly. She listened to tenants. She oversaw charities. She gave kindness where she once had only endured it. Her strength, shaped by loss, made her respected even by those who had once whispered against her name. Her mother bloomed again. She laughed more. She took comfort in purpose. Watching her brought Helena a joy deeper than words. In autumn, Helena learned she was expecting a child. Edward's joy was unrestrained. He held her as if the world itself had given him a gift too precious to risk. He hovered and worried and laughed, promising their child a life filled with love and safety. Winter passed slowly, then spring returned with thunder and rain. Their daughter was born on a stormy night, small and fierce, crying her protest against the world. Helena held her with trembling hands, overwhelmed by a love so strong it frightened her. Edward took the child into his arms and stared at her as if nothing else had ever mattered. They named her Charlotte. Life settled into a rhythm filled with laughter and exhaustion and wonder. Ashworth echoed with the sound of a child's footsteps. Edward read poetry aloud in the evenings. Helena watched the family she once believed impossible take shape before her eyes. Years passed. Charlotte grew into a bright, curious girl. Then came a son, and later another daughter. Helena's mother lived to see them all, her life ending quietly, peacefully, knowing her daughter was loved and safe. Edward aged with grace, his hair touched with silver, his eyes still sharp and kind. They never forgot how close they had come to losing everything. Each year, on the night of the masquerade, they returned to the terrace where truth had finally found them. They danced beneath the stars, alone, remembering. Time continued its steady march. Children grew. They married. Grandchildren filled the halls of Ashworth with new laughter. Helena's hands aged. Her hair turned white. Edward's steps slowed, but his presence remained steady and warm beside her. The paper mask rested in a glass case in their private chambers. Sometimes Helena held it, remembering the girl she once was. Poor, afraid, brave. She had worn paper, and yet she had carried courage strong enough to change her fate. Now, in the quiet of evening, Helena sat beside Edward, his hand resting over hers. They did not speak much anymore. They did not need to. Love had long ago replaced words. As the clock struck midnight somewhere in the halls of Ashworth, Edward squeezed her hand gently. He smiled, leaning into him. She had been seen, she had been chosen, and she had been loved, fully and forever.